Chapter 5. The question is pretty simple at the end of the day. Who do you want to be? Gareth frowns at me across the expanse of the layout table. I'm starting to think it's just his default expression, and I can't really fault him for that. If I was stuck with that adorable halo of fluffy brown curls and a mouthful of chrome, I'd probably frown a lot too. I want to be Ilian. Ilian is fish food. Work with me here. I don't know, Gareth snaps, stabbing his pencil into his pad of graph paper like it slapped his mother. He's been in a pissy mood since he walked in the door 20 minutes ago, and he hasn't exactly sweetened since. We're squatting in the chemistry lab with the lights off because I didn't have time to sweet-talk Mr. Vick into letting us do this on the books. It's easy enough to jimmy the locks on these old doors, but I hate doing it. For one thing, the odds of some nosy teacher walking by and spotting me are better than good. For another, I need another set of hands. For another, I'm not sure I like knowing how to do it in the first place. I'd left Dad snoring loud enough to bring the house down, sprawled out on the sofa. He didn't even twitch when I opened the front door, and I'd taken a moment to watch him in the early morning light, swallowing back the complicated feeling rising in my chest. Al Munson had come crashing back into my life in more flavors than I could count. Sometimes he's just gotten out of prison and needs a place to lie low. Sometimes he needs to borrow money from Wayne. Sometimes he's got an honest-to-God job, for keeps this time. Those are always the shortest stays. But he's never come back for me. And even if it's not like he's trying to pay off a quality time deficit, he came back because he wants me to work with him. He could have gone to any of his buddies, and he came to me. I shouldn't be happy about that, right? I definitely shouldn't, but... What do you mean you don't know? I asked Gareth. You knew when you made Ilian. Gareth is perched on one of the science department's death trap stools, and he keeps rocking back on two of the legs. He's also favoring his left arm. I haven't called him out on either of those things yet, because I don't want Gareth to start using me as a sparring dummy instead of his graph paper. Jeff made Ilian, he says. He said, you can't walk into Hellfire without a character, and he didn't want to wait a billion years for me to figure out how to fill out a character sheet, so he gave me one. Well, that's unhelpful. Whatever. The floating legs of Gareth's stool slam back onto the linoleum, and he shoves to his feet. We don't have to... Okay, first things first, freshman. I risk life and limb and smack my hand down onto his graph paper so he can't take it away. I'm the DM, right? Gareth's eyes are wary. Right. So I'm the one running our sessions. I say when we're over. Understand? Gareth nods. Good. Now sit your butt back down and let's work this out. He sits his butt back down. Thank you, I say. Now we're going to start with the basics. Dwarf, elf, human, gnome, what's calling to you? Ilian was a half-elf. I didn't ask what Ilian was. I know what Ilian was. Ilian was Jeff's. I asked what's calling to you. I like dwarves, Gareth says. Dwarf. Awesome. May I? I pull the pad of paper towards me gingerly, like disarming a gunman, pluck the pencil from Gareth's hand. Dwarf, I write. And I underline it twice. The next question is, what's going to inform your class, okay? Okay, he says, easier now. Alignment. What are you feeling? He stares blankly at me, and I move to yell at Jeff a few notches up on my mental to-do list. This is like who you are, the core of you. Lawful, chaotic, good, evil. So, for example, if you're playing a dwarf, then the rulebook says you'd probably be on the more lawful end of the spectrum, though the good versus evil conundrum is something you'd make a call on for yourself. And once you figure out what combo you prefer, lawful good, lawful evil, even lawful neutral, you'll figure out the sort of, I don't know, moral code you'll be making decisions during the game. There's a line between Gareth's brows as he takes this in. So, if I'm a dwarf, I have to be lawful. You don't have to be anything, I say. That's just what's suggested. What most people think a dwarf is. Lawful good. Gareth's nose wrinkles, and I laugh. I know. Buzzkill. Now me, I like to mix things up. Chaotic evil dwarf? Hell yeah. Don't let yourself get boxed in by what the book says you should be. It's never worth it. Do what you think is going to be the most fun. Gareth says, chaotic. The second I shut my mouth, jumping in so fast that the word clips the end of my last sentence. His eyes are glowing. The kid's got spirit. I want to be chaotic. Good. Classic choice, dude, I say, nodding approvingly. Now let's talk classes. Have you thought about playing a thief? Over the next hour, Hodash the Breaker is born. I can't hold on to last night's dark cloud as I watch Gareth roll his way through his stats and scribble down his ideas for backstory. His enthusiasm is infectious, and it's obvious to me now that Ilian was never his to begin with. Gareth's never been so invested in a Hellfire session as he is right now, bent over his graph paper and breathing life into his chaotic little dwarf rogue. Question, freshman, I say, once the foundations for Hodash have been established and we're shoving papers and books back into our bags getting ready to leave. Gareth peers at me, eyes wary over the top of his humongous backpack. Yeah? It's not a pop quiz, calm down. I sling my jacket over my shoulders, shoving my arms through the sleeves. I'm just curious. If you never played D&D before you got to high school, never filled out a character sheet or anything, why join Hellfire? Gareth shifts from foot to foot. Where else was I supposed to go? I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that, so I just ruffle his hair. Get out of here. I'll see you next Wednesday. He ducks his fluffy head and scoots out the door. I do a final check of the room, erasing any last trace that we were here. Then I'm following, slipping out into the hall and locking the doors behind me. Ronnie is waiting for me on the bench outside the library, like usual. She puts away her book, some bland paperback I'm definitely not going to bother reading for English class, and stands when she sees me coming. Freshman crisis? Averted. Phew. Ronnie mimes swiping sweat from her forehead. Can't have those little sheep wandering around in the cold. We start ambling through the halls, making our gradual way to the front doors. I can't believe you're actually in today, Ronnie says, slinging an arm over my shoulders. Thought you'd be shacked up somewhere with that girl from last night. Shacked up? Granny Ecker, is that you? Granny Ecker would say, you better wrap it up if you don't want to be chasing another tiny demon Munson around this town. This is why your grandma and I get along so well. There was no shacking. I was a perfect gentleman, and so was she. Bummer. I twirl my keys around my finger. You're not making a great case for yourself if you want to ride. Do you want to ride? She grins. Last time? I roll my eyes. Somewhere in the abandoned hallways behind me, something thumps. Ronnie's eyes narrow. Did you hear that? I just shrug. Do you want to ride or not? Another thump, this time followed by a metallic crashing rattle. It's the unmistakable sound of someone getting thrown into a wall of lockers. I look at Ronnie. She looks at me. Do we? She asks. I want to shrug again, to retreat to the van, to tell Ronnie about Paige, about my dad, about every crazy thing that happened last night. But then there's another crash, and now I can hear the voices. I can hear a fragment of what is unmistakably Gareth hissing. Told you. I don't have it. Shit, I mutter. Ronnie is already stalking down the hallway towards the disturbance, but I grab her sleeve before she can get far. Get someone. But her protests fade at the look on my face. Of the two of us, she's the only one who will actually get help if she asks, and we both know it. With an unhappy frown, she swivels on her heel and dashes away in a vague direction of the teacher's lounge, which means that I'm alone now as I shove my keys into my pocket and follow the rising sounds of someone getting their ass handed to them. Gareth's been cornered right outside the auditorium, holding the arm he's already been favoring to his chest. He He's put his back to the wall of lockers, and he's got his best glare pasted across his face. Not that it's having much of an effect on the wall of Hawkins' tiger green surrounding him. I recognize the three guys in Letterman's jackets from the few pep rallies Ronnie's dragged me to. The Hawkins basketball team. Whatever's the opposite of state champions, that's their claim to fame. "You know what happens next, Metal Mouth," the head jackass is saying. This is Tommy H., the worst point guard in central Indiana. "1 punch for every $1 you owe me. What is it, 20? 25, says one of his buddies. Connor? Caleb? I'd have to start giving a shit about sports to be sure, and that's never going to happen. Interest. 25, Tommy H. agrees, and that's cutting you a deal. Gareth's shoulder blades are trying to dig a hole into the lockers. "Why don't you cut yourself a new asshole?" "Why don't I cut you in the..." But we'll never hear the pleasure of hearing whatever unimaginative rebuttal Tommy H. has been cooking in that noggin of his, because Gareth spotted me, and his face is brightened like a goddamn lighthouse. It's too obvious to miss, even for these metalheads. Meatheads, not metalheads. It's too obvious to miss, even for these metalheads, and suddenly 4 pairs of eyes are slamming over me. 3 belonging to Tommy H. and his assorted jock friends, and the 4th belonging to a girl with a blonde ponytail and a JV cheerleader uniform, whose face is ringing some distant bell of recognition that I cannot for the life of me place. "You want something, freak?" Tommy H. snarls. Not particularly. "You okay?" I ask Gareth. Gareth shakes his head. "Yeah," he says. Mixed messages aside, it's pretty clear how this situation is going to go. "I think I heard your mom pull up front. You don't want to keep her waiting." But Tommy H. grabs Gareth's shoulders and slams him back against the lockers when the kid tries to move. Not until you pay up." The girl tugs on the sleeve of one of Tommy H.'s cronies, a blonde shrimp of a guy. "Come on, Jason, can we go?" "Hang on a sec." Jason waves his girlfriend away. "You're Eddie Munson, right?" He's got this kind of manic fire burning at the back of his gaze. It freaks me out way more than Tommy H.'s lubing muscles. I lean against the wall, arms crossed over my chest. If I can't actually be calm, then I can sure as hell act like I am. "What's it matter to you?" "Munson?" Tommy H. is looking at me in a new light now, a sadistic grin spreading across his face. "Oh, man, that's freaking hilarious." The girl has 2 hands wrapped around Jason's wrists now, tugging hard. "Just let them go. It doesn't matter." "You want a Munson to help you out?" Tommy H. sneers the question into Gareth's face, wrapping a hand in a collar of his t-shirt. "That family's all fuck-ups and freaks." I swallow back the spark of rage igniting in my gut. "I'm not looking to start any shit, dude." "I heard the cops keep running odds," Tommy H. says, "on who's going to bring your dad in next, or if he'll turn up dead on the side of the highway first." "Stop it, Tommy!" The girl has abandoned her crazy boyfriend, weaseling into the circle to grab a hold of Tommy. Weaseling her way into the circle to grab hold of the hand Tommy's got clamped down onto Gareth. "Let him go," she says again, giving his hand a pull. And maybe it's the shock of someone wearing Hawkins tiger green standing up to him, but Tommy H. lets go. Chrissy Cunningham. That name comes to me in a rush now that there's a spark of something beyond cowed compliance in her face. Chrissy Cunningham. She's just a sophomore, but everyone with a working brain cell knows she's the rising queen of Hawkins High. I'm used to seeing her just as some cutout of a cheerleader, all perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect everything. It's such a fundamentally uninteresting package that my brain just kind of skips over her, yawning at her existence. But there's another Chrissy Cunningham. I just hadn't thought she'd survived the jump to high school. I hadn't thought she'd even existed outside the boundaries of Hawkins Middle Auditorium. The thing about the Hawkins Junior Talent Show was that every middle school student was required to participate at least once. Experience-wise, it was exactly as torturous as it sounded, tormenting both the angsty tweens forced to sing and dance in front of a jury of their snickering peers and the parents who'd been dragged along to make up the audience. But in the name of building public speaking skills, The event continued year after year, and year after year, another generation of Hawkins children walked away with psychological scars. I'd put the ordeal off for as long as I could. I'd been trying to slip through the 8th grade unnoticed too, but then Mr. Fleming had called me out in front of the class and forced me to sign up then and there. But I wasn't about to go down without taking my friends with me, so I dropped Ronnie in, and she'd roped Dougie in, and thus, Corroded Coffin was born. By the night of the talent show, we'd managed to practice a grand total of 2 times and had gotten the school administration to approve our song choice only by emphasizing the priest in Judas Priest, and I had just been about ready to puke all over myself. This was the reason Dad had kept his distance when he dropped me off at school at 5 p.m. One wrong move and he'd driven home wearing the bag of Fritos I'd eaten for lunch. Here. He'd pressed a guitar pick into my fingers. His guitar pick. I held it up in front of my face, feeling a little like Gollum with the One Ring. You're going to do great. You're coming tonight, right? I'd asked, and I felt instantly better at the sight of his crooked smile. You know what they say about wild horses, kid, he'd asked, and then squeezed my fingers around the pick. It's yours, by the way, for keeps. I'd still been clutching the pick tight enough that my hands were starting to cramp, as hours later, Hawkins Middle had started to make their way through its exhaustive program. Most of the reluctant performers had camped out in the hallway outside of the auditorium, since the theater didn't exactly have a giant backstage. But if you knew where to go, and nobody was eager to look for you, there was a small catwalk that ringed the edge of the curtain. With good enough stealth, you'd be able to camp out there and scan the audience for familiar faces, which is what I'd been doing when someone settled on the catwalk next to me. I'd almost shrieked in surprise. I'd been so focused on the brief glimpses I could catch of the audience that I hadn't even noticed someone coming up behind me, and now there was this girl perched there, her spindly arms wrapped around her spindly legs and her huge eyes shadowed by the murky catwalk lighting. Are you looking for someone? She'd whispered. Below, 5 7th graders clattered clumsily through the baton-twirling routine. I hadn't been quite sure what to do. By all accounts, this was not the type of girl that should be talking to me. She wasn't Ronnie Ecker, not wearing hand-me-down overalls and a battered cap. This girl was polished. Her hair was blonde. It was curled. It looked like she'd skipped off the cover of some Nancy Drew novel. But after an excruciating silence, it became clear that this girl hadn't made some hideous mistake talking to me, or at least not one she'd figured out yet. So I cleared my throat and whispered, "My dad." "Where is he?" she'd asked, leaning around me like somehow she'd be able to pick Al Munson out of a sea of equally unfamiliar adults. I just shrugged. Because I'd been up on this catwalk for almost an hour now, and the closest thing I'd found to Dad had been my Uncle Wayne, planted way on the left side of the auditorium, watching every act with the same stoic expression on his bearded face. He didn't come? I'd expected pity in the girl's eyes, and I was surprised when I found hungry jealousy instead. He's just running late, I said, and it sounded hollow even to me. But she just nodded like she'd believe me. I came up here to look for my mom. Is she running late too? She'd wrinkled her nose. I wish. She's right there. I followed the direction of her finger and instantly locked in on the immaculate, poised woman seated front row center. I'm sorry, I said, and that made the girl smile. Me too, she'd whispered, like it was a secret. Like it was something she'd never told anyone before. One of the girls on stage below dropped her baton for the 50th time, and I realized that the act was drawing to a close. I'd shoved up into my knees, flinching at the dig of the catwalk grill into my skin. My band's up next, I said. Break a leg, she told me, filling in the blank. And Eddie. Eddie, if your dad gets held up, I'll cheer for you. She flailed her arms, and I noticed her pom-poms for the first time. Right back at ya. I'd winced as soon as it came out of my mouth, but the embarrassment had almost been worth it just for the grin that I'd gotten out of her. Later, when the last chords of Exciter had thumped unwillingly into the offended ears of Hawkins' parents, and we'd all straggled through the final curtain call, I'd spotted the girl in the lobby with her mom on one side and a blank-faced, suited man, I don't know, her dad, on the other. The mom had been in the middle of some lecture I couldn't hear, but from her gestures, I'd been pretty sure she'd been detailing where in the girl's routine she'd screwed up. I'd met the girl's eyes through the crowd, just long enough for her to mouth, "I'm sorry," one more time. I'd caught the edge of the girl's... Oops, I got lost. I'd caught the edge of the girl's answering smile before her mom, noticing the girl's split attention, had grabbed her by the shoulder and yanked her towards the door. I thought the last 4 years had stamped out any trace of the unsettled, imperfect, approachable Chrissy Cunningham, but maybe I was wrong. "Chris is right," Jason chips in now. "We shouldn't hang around. Harrington will be by any second, and he won't like..." "Harrington's not going to do shit," Tommy spits. "Not since Wheeler started wearing his balls as a necklace, and this kid owes me." "Wow," I drawl. "Pretty crazy to talk about some other guy missing his balls when you're the one who gets his kicks beating up freshmen." It was a mistake. I know it's a mistake as soon as I open my mouth. The only thing I want to do is get Gareth and get out of here, but now Tommy is turning his cherry red face towards me. Any spark of the remnants of Chrissy's personality dampens and dies as Tommy's friends fall into position at his back, and now it's just me against a bunch of glowering jocks. Wonderful. "I think the Freak King's been skipping school," Tommy says. "It's up to us to make sure he learns his lesson." "Gareth," is all I manage to get out, and there's a shoulder driving into my stomach as Tommy dives head-on into me. My teeth clatter in my skull as I fly backwards, landing smack on the back of the linoleum. As all the breath explodes from my lungs, and I have enough sense to give it the shape of one word, I whisper, "Go!" Thankfully, Gareth's got enough sense not to stick around, because I can see the flash of his Converse through the thicket of approaching legs as he darts off in the opposite direction. "The kid owed us 25, Tommy sneers down at me. "I think we're going to have to charge you double." He winds up to launch a kick into my ribs, and then I grab his leg on entry and roll, taking him with me. He slams down, some combination of 9 different curse words erupting from his mouth. "Is this the lesson you had in mind?" I ask. He pushes back with a grunt, scrambling to his knees. When he regains his balance, he pulls his fist back, looming over me, and I curl up as best I can with the basketball morons crowding in close, covering my face with my arms. "What the hell is going on here?" I'm not enough of an idiot to take my arms down, which means the only thing I can see is a sea of legs parting for a pair of sensible khakis. But even though I can't see this person's face, I sure as hell can recognize his voice as his brown tassel loafers stop in front of me. "Mr. Hayes," Principal Higgins intones, "explain." "It was Munson," whines Tommy H. He's still crouched on his knees. What a suck-up. "He wouldn't stop hassling Chrissy." "Bullshit!" I hear Ronnie spit from somewhere behind Higgins. "That's not true," Chrissy protests at the same time. "Come on, Chris," says Jason as he's hauling her down the hall. I finally drop my arms and shove to my feet, catching a final glimpse of her before she's dragged away. "That's not what happened," I tell Higgins. Ronnie is hovering at Higgins' elbow. "These guys were ganging up on a freshman. Eddie was making sure he was okay." Higgins raised an eyebrow. "Where's this freshman now?" Of course there's no sign of Gareth. I told him to run. "Thank God you came by when you did, sir," said Tommy H. "I didn't know what this freak was going to do next." I roll my eyes. "You boot-licking little..." "That's enough!" Higgins barks. "Mr. Hayes, you and your friends move along. Our Hawkins Tigers should be focused on excelling in their extracurriculars, not getting wrapped up in... this." The wave of his hand takes in all of me. "Thank you, sir," says Tommy H. He moves maybe Connor in the shoulder with his hand. I just fucked this up. He shoves maybe Connor in the shoulder with a muttered, "Move, asshole." The two of them are jogging down the hall. "You as well, Veronica," Higgins tells Ronnie. "But..." "Ronnie," I catch her eye. "It's okay. Get out of here." I can see the muscles in her jaw clench like she's biting back another protest. But after a long moment, she caves. "I'll see you later," she says, like she's trying to extract a promise. "Later," I say. "Promise." And then she's gone, and it's just me and Higgins under the buzzing fluorescence in this empty hallway. I shove my hands into my pockets. How about me, sir? I ask. We're all Hawkins Tigers here. Don't I have extracurriculars to excel at? The acid in Higgins's glare could etch metal. You're with me, Munson, he says. You and I are going to have a little chat. And that's all for chapter 6.